I still remember the way the bell above the diner door sounded that morning. Not loud, not soft either, just tired, like it had rung too many times for too many years and stopped caring who walked in. She walked in around 7. I was wiping down the counter, refilling the sugar caddies, doing the things you do when you've worked the same shift for 11 years and your hands move on their own. The coffee was fresh. The grill was warm. Outside, the snow had just started to come down again, that soft kind, the kind that lands on your jacket and waits a second before melting. She stood by the door for maybe 3 seconds, long enough for me to look up, long enough for everyone at the counter to look up too. You have to understand something about Hollow Creek. We don't get strangers in winter. The road from the highway is bad enough in October. By late January, it's a long white line that even the locals don't trust. So when a woman walks in alone, wearing a coat that's too thin and boots that look like she bought them at a gas station, you notice. Everybody notices. She was maybe 28, maybe 30, hard to tell. Her cheeks were red from the cold and her lips were chapped in that way that hurts just looking at them. She had a duffel bag over one shoulder. The strap had been taped where it tore. "Just one," she said. Her voice was quiet but not weak. "There's a difference." I pointed her to the booth by the window, the one with the heater under it. I always give that booth to people who look cold. She sat down slow, real careful, like her body hurt somewhere she didn't want to show. I brought her coffee without asking. She wrapped both hands around the mug like she hadn't held something warm in a long time. "You want to see a menu?" She shook her head. "Just toast if that's okay." "It's okay." I went back behind the counter and put the bread in. 2 slices. Then I added a third because I had a feeling she wasn't going to ask for more even if she wanted it. That's when Marlene leaned over from the next stool. Marlene runs the post office. She's been running it since before I was born. She has opinions about everything and she shares them whether you ask or not. "Where you in from, honey?" Marlene said, loud enough for the booth to hear. The woman looked up. She tried to smile. "Just passing through." "Passing through to where?" "Anywhere, I guess." Marlene made a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite anything. She turned back to her eggs. "I want to say I said something then. I want to say I stepped in. But the truth is I just kept buttering toast because that's what I do when something feels wrong and I don't know how to fix it. I butter toast. I wipe counters. I keep my head down." The woman ate slow, real slow, like she was trying to make it last. I refilled her coffee twice and she thanked me both times. Her hands were shaking a little, but I don't think it was from the cold anymore. When she went to pay, she pulled out a small wallet. The kind with the snap that doesn't snap right anymore. She counted out the money in singles, $3 and some change. The toast was $4.50. She looked at the money, then she looked at me. Her face did something I'm not going to forget for a long time. It wasn't embarrassment exactly. It was something past embarrassment, something quieter. "I can leave the coffee," she said. "I only meant to get the toast." "It's on the house," I said. "No, please, I can." "It's on the house." She nodded. She didn't look at me when she said thank you. She just picked up her duffel bag and walked out into the snow. The bell rang again, that same tired sound. I thought that was the end of it. I figured she'd hitch back to the highway or knock on a door somewhere or do whatever it is people do when they've run out of places to be. I figured she wasn't my problem. That's an ugly thing to admit, but I'm telling you the truth. She wasn't gone 2 hours when I heard the first part of the story. Pete from the hardware store came in around 9:30. He stomped the snow off his boots and ordered his usual black coffee and a slice of pie even though it was morning. Pete eats pie whenever he wants. That's Pete. "You see that gal walk by?" he said. "What gal?" The one with the duffel, thin coat, looked half frozen. "She was in here, why?" Pete shook his head. "She went into Hadley's, asked about a room. Hadley sent her packing." "Why?" You know Hadley. I did know Hadley. Hadley owned the only place in town that rented rooms by the week, a little two-story above the feed store with rooms that smelled like old wood and worked just fine for hunters and the occasional contractor passing through. Hadley was particular. Hadley was particular in the way some people are particular when they want a reason to say no. She didn't have the money, I asked. She had some, not enough. Hadley could have worked with her, he didn't want to. I didn't say anything, I just poured Pete his coffee. The next person who came in told me she'd been to the church. The pastor's wife had answered the door. Said the shelter program didn't start back up until March. Said there were resources in the city, 2 hours down the mountain. Did she have a car? I asked. She didn't have a car. The next person told me she'd been to the gas station, tried to use the bathroom. The clerk made her buy something first. She bought a pack of gum. The next person told me she'd been seen sitting on the bench outside the laundromat, just sitting, not crying, just sitting. By noon, the whole town knew about her, and the whole town had decided she wasn't ours. That's the part I want you to hear. Nobody was cruel. Nobody yelled at her or threw anything at her or did anything you'd see in a movie. They just turned her away one polite door at a time. They said, sorry, we don't have room. They said, sorry, that's not what we do here. They said, sorry, you'd be better off somewhere else. 100 small sorries can freeze a person worse than the snow. I want to tell you about the mountain man now, because this is where he comes in. But I have to tell you about him the way the town told me about him, because that's how I knew him for a long time. Through stories. Through the way people lowered their voices when they said his name. His name was Caleb Roan. He lived 8 miles up the ridge past where the county stops plowing. His cabin sat on a piece of land his grandfather cleared 100 years ago, back when this whole valley was timber and trapping and not much else. He came down to town maybe once every 2 weeks. He bought flour. He bought coffee. He bought whatever the twins needed for school when they were old enough to go. The twins were 5, a boy and a girl, Sam and Wren. I'd seen them maybe 4 times in my whole life. They always held his hands when they walked into a store, one on each side. Like he was a bridge they were crossing. Their mother was gone. I never knew the details, and I'm not going to make up a story I don't know. Some said cancer. Some said she just left. Some said both in different orders. What I know is that Caleb raised them alone up on that mountain, and he raised them quiet, and he raised them good. You could tell. The way they said please, the way they looked you in the eye when you handed them a candy bar. But the town had decided things about Caleb a long time ago. He was odd. He didn't talk much. He didn't go to church. He didn't drink at the bar. He didn't do any of the things small towns used to decide whether you belong. So he didn't belong. Not really. Not in the way Marlene and Pete and Hadley belonged. He was tolerated. There's a word for you, tolerated. I'm telling you all this because of what happened around 2 o'clock that afternoon. That's when his truck pulled up outside the diner. I heard it before I saw it. His truck had a sound. Old Ford, half rust, the kind of engine that coughs once before it settles. He parked across the street in front of the feed store because the diner lot was full. He got out. He had his coat on, the heavy canvas one, and his hat pulled low. The twins climbed down after him. Sam first, then Wren. They wore matching little boots that didn't match anything else they had on, mismatched mittens, hats their dad had probably knitted himself because that was the kind of thing Caleb did. They didn't come into the diner. They walked the other way, toward the laundromat. I didn't think anything of it at first. I figured he had laundry. Mountain folks do laundry in town sometimes, when their well freezes up or their machine breaks. But then I remembered the bench. The bench outside the laundromat. I went to the window. I wiped a little circle in the fog with my sleeve. She was still there. The woman, the one with the duffel, sitting on the bench in the snow exactly where she'd been an hour ago. Her hands were inside her sleeves. Her shoulders were up around her ears. She wasn't moving much. Caleb saw her. I watched him see her. He slowed down. The twins kept walking for a second before they noticed he'd stopped, and then they stopped too, and they looked up at him with those little faces. He didn't approach her, he just stood there, maybe 20 feet away, watching. I wish I could tell you what was in his head. I can't. I've thought about it a lot. I think he was deciding something. I think he was trying to figure out if it was his business. Because Caleb Rohn was a man who minded his own business. The whole town would tell you that. But then something happened that I don't think anyone could have predicted. The twins ran. I mean, they ran. Sam went first. He let go of his dad's hand and he ran across that snow like he knew exactly where he was going, and his sister was 2 steps behind him, and they ran straight to that bench and they ran straight to her, and they wrapped their arms around her like she was somebody they'd been looking for all day. She didn't move at first. She didn't even seem to understand what was happening. Then I saw her face change, just a little, just enough. Wren put her cheek on the woman's knee. Sam put his arms around her waist and he wouldn't let go. Caleb stood there in the snow with his mouth a little bit open. I stood there in the diner with my rag in my hand. Nobody knew what to do. I'll tell you something. Kids see things adults don't. I've believed that my whole life, not in a magic way, in a regular way. They see things because they haven't learned yet what to ignore. Those twins had never met that woman, I am sure of it. There was no reason for them to know her. There was no reason for them to run to her. But they did. And she sat there in the snow with 2 small children holding onto her, and she finally cried. That's what I remember most. Not the cold, not the way Caleb looked, the sound she made. Quiet. Just a small sound like something coming loose inside her chest after being stuck for a long time. Caleb walked over slow. He stopped a few feet from the bench. He took his hat off, which is a thing my grandfather used to do, a thing men don't really do anymore. They don't usually do that, he said. She looked up. Her face was wet and red, and she was trying to laugh and cry at the same time, the way you do when something breaks the right way instead of the wrong way. I don't know what to say, she said. You don't have to say anything. He stood there a second longer. The snow was falling on his shoulders. The twins still hadn't let go. Ma'am, he said, are you hungry? She nodded. Are you cold? She nodded. Do you have anywhere to go tonight? She didn't answer that one. She didn't have to. He put his hat back on. He looked at his kids. He looked at her. He looked across the street at the diner, where I was standing in the window with my rag, and I swear to God he saw me, and I swear to God he knew I'd seen the whole thing. Come on, he said. It's a long road up. Her name was Elena. I didn't learn that until later, of course. I learned it the same way I learned everything else about that day. Slow, in pieces, from people who saw what they saw and told me what they thought it meant. She got in his truck. That was the first thing the town talked about. She got in his truck with 2 children she'd never met and a man she'd known for about 6 minutes, and she let him drive her up the mountain. People had opinions about that. Marlene had opinions. Hadley had opinions. The pastor's wife, who turned her away from the church that morning, suddenly had a lot of opinions too. By dinner time, the diner was full of people who hadn't lifted a finger to help her, all talking about how irresponsible she was for going up there. How dangerous. How a woman in her situation shouldn't just trust the first man who offered. I'll be honest with you. I almost said something that night. I almost slammed the coffee pot down and said something I would have regretted. But I didn't, I just kept pouring. What I'm about to tell you I learned later. Some of it from Caleb himself. Some of it from Elena, the few times I saw her after. Some of it I'm filling in based on knowing those people the way you know people in a small town, which is to say only partly, only sometimes, and never enough. The drive up the mountain takes about 40 minutes if the road is clear. That day it took over an hour. The snow had picked up. The wipers on Caleb's old Ford were doing the best they could and not much more. The twins sat in the back. They'd insisted. Ren was on the driver's side, Sam on the passenger side, and Alina was in the middle of the bench up front because there wasn't a back seat the way newer trucks have. Just a long bench. She held her duffel bag on her lap like it was the only thing in the world that belonged to her. Because maybe it was. Caleb drove with one hand, the other rested on the gear shift. He didn't say much. That was his way. He wasn't the kind of man who filled silence just to fill it. About halfway up, when the road got bad enough that he had to drop to second gear, he finally spoke. My wife's name was Hannah. Alina looked at him. She passed 2 years ago this spring, cancer that started in her stomach and didn't stop. He kept his eyes on the road. I'm telling you because I figure you're wondering what kind of man takes a stranger home in front of his children. And the answer is, I'm a man whose children haven't run to a person since their mother died. Not once. Not at school, not in church, not at the store. Not anybody. Alina didn't say anything. The twins were quiet in the back. They were listening, but they were also half asleep, the way kids get when they're warm and the road is bumpy. I don't know why they did that today, Caleb said. I don't have an explanation for you. But I'm a man who pays attention when something happens that doesn't have an explanation. I don't want to be a burden, Alina said. It came out small. You're not a burden, you're a guest. There's a difference. She turned her face to the window. The mountain was going past in the dark, all white and black in shadow. She put her hand against the glass and just left it there. My husband died 8 months ago, she said. Caleb nodded. He didn't say sorry. I think he knew sorry wasn't what she needed. He had a stroke. He was 31. We didn't have insurance. The hospital took everything. The bank took the house. His family took the rest of it because they said I wasn't really family without him. She laughed a small, dry laugh. I have a sister in Oregon. I was trying to get to her. I made it this far on bus money and the kindness of a trucker who let me ride 2 states for free. The bus from the city went off the road last week. They've been running shuttles, but the next one isn't until Thursday. Where were you sleeping? The Greyhound station, until last night. They closed early because of the storm. And in town? She didn't answer. Everybody, she finally said. I asked everybody. Caleb's jaw moved, just a small tight motion. He didn't say anything about the town. He didn't need to. The cabin sat on a rise above a frozen creek. It was bigger than I would have guessed. 2 stories, with a wraparound porch and a stovepipe that had smoke coming out of it because Caleb had banked the fire before he came down. Alina saw it through the snow and she made a small sound. Not surprise exactly. Something else. I thought you'd live in like a shack, she said. He smiled. It was the first time I'd ever heard of Caleb Roan smiling. My grandfather built this. My dad added on. I added the porch when Hannah was pregnant. She wanted somewhere to sit and watch the snow. It's beautiful. It's home. He parked. He got out. He came around to her side and opened the door for her, which was not a thing men in our town did anymore. Alina climbed down. The twins climbed down after her. They didn't run to her this time. They just walked beside her, one on each side like they'd already decided she belonged with them. Inside, the cabin smelled like wood smoke and something else. Cinnamon maybe, or just clean. The kind of clean that comes from a house being loved instead of just maintained. There were pictures on the wall. A lot of them were of Hannah. A woman with dark hair and a quiet smile, holding 2 bobbies that didn't look like bobbies anymore. There was a picture of her on the porch in summer, sunlight on her shoulders, laughing at something off camera. Alina stopped in front of that one. She's lovely, she said. She was. He went to the kitchen. He started water for tea. He pulled a quilt off the back of a chair and brought it to her without asking, just draped it around her shoulders. The twins disappeared up the stairs and came back down with their arms full. a pillow, a stuffed rabbit, a pair of wool socks. They piled it all on the couch beside her. "What's all this?" Alina said. "They're making you a nest," Caleb said. Wren looked up. "Like for a bird," she said very seriously, "when they're tired." Alina did the thing again, the thing where she laughed and cried at the same time. "Now I want to tell you about the town, because the town didn't stop being the town just because Caleb took her up the mountain." By the next morning, everybody knew. I don't know how, that's how it works. Somebody saw the truck, somebody saw the duffel bag, somebody put it together. By breakfast at the diner, there were people who didn't even know her name but knew she was up there, with him, with his kids. "You hear about it," Marlene said. "She was at her usual stool, she had eggs, she had opinions." "Hear about what?" I said. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. "That woman, the one from yesterday, she went home with Caleb Roan. He gave her a ride. She stayed the night. It was a snowstorm, Marlene. You don't just stay the night with a man you don't know." I set the coffee pot down a little harder than I meant to. She didn't have anywhere else, Marlene, because none of us would take her. The diner got quiet. Marlene's mouth opened a little. "I'm just saying," she said. "I know what you're saying." I went into the back. I needed to be away from her for a minute. I washed some dishes that didn't need washing. I told myself to calm down. I told myself it wasn't my place. I told myself a lot of things. When I came back out, Pete was at the counter. He looked at me a little sheepish. "She's right that it's odd, though," Pete said. "You have to admit." "What's odd about it, Pete?" "He doesn't know her." "His kids ran to her, Pete, in the snow, after she'd been sitting on that bench for 3 hours because nobody in this town would open a door for her. They ran to her. You tell me what part of that is odd." Pete didn't answer. He ate his pie. 3 days passed. Alina stayed on the mountain. Caleb came down once for groceries and didn't talk about it to anyone, which of course made everyone talk about it more. Then the pastor's wife went up there. I want you to picture this woman. Her name was Doreen. She'd been the pastor's wife for 30 years. She had a hair color that didn't appear in nature and a way of pressing her lips together when she didn't approve of something, which was most of the time. She had turned Alina away from the church door 3 days earlier without even letting her sit down inside to warm up. Now she drove her little sedan up that mountain road with chains on the tires, because she had appointed herself the spokesperson for everyone's discomfort. She knocked on Caleb's door. He opened it. He didn't invite her in. "Caleb," she said, "I'm here as a friend." "You're not my friend, Doreen, but say what you came to say." She looked past him. She could see Alina in the kitchen. Alina was wearing one of Hannah's old sweaters because her own clothes were still drying by the stove. Doreen took it in. I imagine her lips pressed together. "There's talk in town. There's always talk in town. About you and her, about what it looks like. It looks like a woman who had nowhere to sleep, sleeping somewhere. Caleb, please, people are worried about the children, about what they're seeing." That's when Caleb did something I wish I'd been there for. He stepped out onto the porch. He shut the door behind him so Alina wouldn't hear. He looked Doreen in the eye and he spoke quiet. "Doreen," he said, "my children watched their mother die. They watched her get smaller and smaller until she fit in a box. They have not run to a single soul in 2 years, not their grandmother, not their teacher, not the people at her funeral who said they loved her. Nobody. This woman walked into our town and you turned her away. The whole town turned her away. And then my children ran to her like she'd been theirs all along. So you tell me, Doreen, you tell me what they're seeing, because I think they're seeing something the rest of you stopped being able to see a long time ago." Doreen didn't have an answer. She got in her sedan. She drove back down. She didn't say what he'd said to her, not to anyone, but something in her face changed after that, and the town noticed. The town always notices. I want to tell you about the night Elena almost left. It was day 5. She'd been on the mountain almost a week. The roads were finally clear enough that the shuttle to the city would be running the next morning. Caleb had offered to drive her down. He'd said it without any pressure, just stated it. The shuttle leaves at 9. I can have you there by 8:30. She'd nodded. She'd said thank you. That night she sat on the porch with a blanket around her shoulders and she watched the moon come up over the ridge. The twins were already asleep. Caleb came out with 2 mugs. He gave her one. He sat down on the step next to her, not too close. They didn't talk for a while. I keep thinking I should have died with him, she said, quiet, not dramatic, just a thing she was saying. Caleb nodded slow. I thought that too, he said, after Hannah. How do you stop? You don't, you just keep getting up. And one day you notice you stop thinking it for a whole afternoon, and the next week it's a whole day. And then a month later you feel guilty for noticing because how dare you forget her for a whole day? And then you forgive yourself for that too, eventually. She looked at him. Does it ever stop hurting? No, he said, but it stops being the only thing. She drank her tea. The wind moved through the pines. Caleb, she said, why did you stop in the snow that day? When you saw me on the bench before they ran, you stopped. He thought about it. I don't know, he said finally. I think I recognized you. You didn't know me. I know, but I recognized you anyway, the way you were sitting. I'd seen Hannah sit like that in the hospital toward the end, like she was just waiting to see what would happen next. He took a slow breath. I almost kept walking. I want you to know that. I almost did. I'm not a hero. I was just standing there trying to figure out if it was my business. And then my kids decided for me. She set her mug down. They're remarkable, you know. I know. They're going to do something important in this world. They already did. She didn't leave the next morning. The shuttle came and went, and she didn't get on it. Caleb didn't ask her to stay. He didn't ask her to go. He just made breakfast and the twins set the table the way they'd been setting it all week, with 4 places, and when nobody got up to leave, that was the answer. The town found out a few days later. The shuttle driver had checked his manifest. He told the diner. The diner told everyone. This time the talk was different. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe it was Doreen who had gone quiet. Maybe it was something else. Maybe small towns are like big animals. They take a long time to turn, but they do turn sometimes in the right weather. Pete came in one morning. He sat at the counter. He asked for coffee. He asked for pie. He looked at me a long time. I drove past Caleb's road yesterday, he said. Yeah. His porch light was on, even though it was daytime. He probably forgot. He doesn't forget things, Pete. Pete chewed his pie. Maybe he wants people to see it's on, I said. Pete nodded slow. He didn't say anything else.